5. You are up to date once again. Here are Bill and Laura.
All right, Jack, thank you. We'll see you at the half hour.
All right. The latest known encounter between a wild animal park trainer and an elephant there has raised the ire of some folks. We'll find out whether it's abuse or just normal discipline right after this.
November 8th and 9th, 8 o'clock at the San Diego Sports Arena. Call 226-8212.
Last year, the furor over reported abuse of a large female elephant named Dunda embroiled the Wild Animal Park's trainers in tremendous controversy and ultimately led to a new state law specifically prohibiting such mistreatment. That's why this weekend's revelation of this dramatic encounter between trainer Steve Cunningham and the female elephant Peaches has renewed that uproar. This tape was shot by park visitor Kevin Conover, who was shocked by what he witnessed. The question is whether the trainer's actions fell within the bounds of normal discipline or if they violate that new state law. Here to talk about that is Zoo and Wild Animal Park spokesman Jeff Jewett and animal advocate spokeswoman Sally Meckler. We welcome both of you to Inside San Diego this morning. Jeff, let's begin with you. You were there watching the videotape when that first story first aired. Tell us, what did we just see?
Well, I think what you just saw is an elephant keeper who is disciplining an elephant, and what you didn't see is important too, because prior to that, the elephant takes a good whack at Steve, knocks him in the lower back below the rib cage, and he had some swelling, some possible internal injuries from that.
So how much of what he did was anger and reaction out of being hurt by that elephant, and how much of it was legitimate?
What he did actually is kind of a textbook example of the proper way to discipline an elephant. After he received a pretty good blow from the elephant, he has to immediately make known that he cannot allow the elephant to bully around the keepers. So with his elephant hook, the wooden end of his elephant stick actually, he swings at the elephant, hits her in the trunk 4 times, and then when she turns around, he hits her in the rear end once as she goes. She continues up, and he has, by voice command, has her raise a front foot and then a back foot. That just establishes their relationship as keeper being in control of the situation in the elephant yard. And then he stands right there.
What's to say that that elephant wasn't just being playful at the time that that happened?
Well, actually, the circumstance that this was in really is very pertinent to what you see. Peaches is the dominant African elephant at the Wild Animal Park. She's 39 years old and 7,000 pounds. Elephants establish a social hierarchy. She was picking on the youngest African elephant, Dunda. So she had been hitting Dunda and chasing Dunda around the yard. Steve came out and put himself between Peaches and Dunda. And
that doesn't seem like a very wise thing to do.
It was a pretty brave thing to do, I'd say. And at that point, when he turned around to see if Dunda was okay, Peaches, being in a revved up state from chasing Dunda, when Steve turned his attention to Dunda for a second, she swang out and smacked him. And that instance requires that he protect not only himself at that moment, but also all the other elephant keepers that have to come back into the yard.
This was the first time you've had a chance, Sally, to see that videotape, and I understand the difficulty in not really being there, and you're hearing Jeff's explanation, but you were also very instrumental in getting this law passed, the McCorkindale law this year about that abuse. Do you think this falls under that? What would you like to see happen, and what's your reaction to what you saw?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I don't think it's fair to condemn the keeper in any way. In a situation like this, he has to protect himself. And the problem that I have is that I don't believe that the keeper belongs in the yard with the elephant, and certainly not alone in the yard with the elephants. The trend is moving more and more toward a hands-off approach of management of these large animals, and that's what I believe is the most appropriate way if these animals have to be exhibited. And I think there's a big question about whether or not it's even appropriate to exhibit an animal such as an elephant that's large and dangerous and has a lot of management problems. I think that a more hands-off approach is more appropriate. For instance, you don't often see a keeper walking around in the rhinoceros yard with a stick bopping them on the head.
That's true. They don't get away with that. They're certainly not that docile. Well, as we look at the tape again, I want you to tell me, at what point does something like this move into the area that's against the McCorkindale law?
Well,
what does he have to do to this elephant to make it abusive insofar as that law is concerned?
Well, so far as the law is concerned, we really won't know if he's broken the law until we see what type of damage has been done to the animal.
So it's the damage on the elephant?
Yes, the law itself states that the skin cannot be broken, cannot be permanently damaged, and cannot have a scarring occur as a result of the incident. So the law is only as good as enforcement. for the law as well.
Let's ask Jeff. Was the skin broken? Was there any scarring?
Oh, absolutely not. The elephant has fairly thick skin, and he's being hit by a 180-pound person with a little stick, comparatively. So,
which brings to mind the question: how in the world does a 180-pound man with a little stick control a 7,000-pound beast to begin with?
Well, using his head, he has to think like an elephant. I mean, elephants set the rules. They don't care if a state senator has made a law. Elephants don't care if somebody's there with a video camera. He has to use his head and his action and his bravado to project a bigger than he really is, a bigger presence. And I'm sure the elephant was frustrated and surprised, irritated, but definitely not hurt.
Yeah. Have the ways in which your trainers out there handle the elephants changed since the law was passed?
I think the elephant trainers, elephant keepers are more sensitive to what they do around the elephants, to the kind of discipline that they give the elephants, and more sensitive to whether someone's watching. And I think that's pretty much a detriment to their safety, actually.
Why so?
Because when an elephant attacks a keeper, the reinforcement, the discipline needs to be immediate and really without consideration of whether anyone's watching. That shouldn't really matter. They need to protect themselves by establishing their position at the top of the social hierarchy in the elephant herd.
My whole point is I don't think that that's necessary. I don't think that we have to have a dominant submissive situation here. It's not necessary. We don't see that kind of management with other large mammals. I think the elephants themselves can take care of their own hierarchies and their own social hierarchy and situation. And I believe that this may mean in the future that you're going to see some changes, or that hopefully we will see some changes in the types of designs that are involved in enclosures for these animals, so that there will be more environmental stimulus and more social stimulus possible. And in a situation such as this, where there is a conflict, or perhaps you're having a dominance relationship between two animals, the environment will be such that the animals can maneuver and get away from each other. And if that's not possible, and you run into a situation where two elephants just cannot coexist, then perhaps they should think about moving some of the elephants around into different social situations.
Sally raises an interesting point. You don't do this with rhinoceros or lions or anything else. Is it because they don't do tricks?
I think it has nothing to do with tricks. These are African elephants. They aren't in a show. What it has to do with are the elephant's health and conditioning. An elephant is, as Sally says, one of the most dangerous animals in the zoo. They hurt or injure more keepers. But they're an animal that requires the most intimate care of any zoo animal. In the wild, they'll walk 20 miles a day and wear down the pads on the bottom of their feet. But in captivity, because we feed them, they don't go searching for food. The keepers have to get right up next to them and trim their foot pads. An infected foot is the leading cause of death for a captive elephant.
So you need more of that hands-on. Let me wrap this up by asking, where does this go from here? Where would you like to see it go from here?
Well, I'd like to see some changes in elephant management. I'd like to see some changes in some of these enclosures, and I would like to see the zoo look into some of the other zoos that do have some changes in position, such as the Portland Zoo, where in order to do medical type of close work such as that, there is such a thing called a crush or a squeeze, which is a small area where the animal can't move.
Let me just ask Jeff to wrap this up with what the zoo plans on doing now.
Well, we really don't plan on doing anything. These elephant keepers need to be safe, and for the elephant's best health, the keepers need to work right next to the elephant and have their trust. These are men and women with spouses and families, and they can't risk their lives by letting an elephant knock them around.
Jeff Jewett and Sally Mackler, thank you both for joining us. I know this discussion is not going to end here. I appreciate your time. Laura.
We watch her every day at 4 o'clock, 5 days a week. We love her.